So guys, I know I usually do individual component reviews and that's more my thing, but come on. If you were a reviewer and somebody said, hey, how would you like to review this system? We'll throw in a 7900X and a GTX 1080 Ti. Would you say no? Guys, I am death on pre-manufactured systems. Like, if you were to tell me what should I do, I'd say build your own. Just build your own computer. So it might seem a little strange that I'm going to be doing a review with a pre-built system from iBuyPower. But, I do, love the concept of testing out a GTX 1080 Ti, but the simple fact is not everybody wants to get into building a computer. You got to worry about static. You got to worry about components working. You may need BIOS updates. You may get a buggy part. You may have to RMA stuff. There is a lot of things that go into building a computer that can go wrong, and if you're not the kind of person who likes to do a lot of troubleshooting and problem solving, but you really want a nice gaming system, then you may be like, I'm not building my own. I guess I'll go buy a Dell. No, do not buy a Dell. Because there is better options. And that was one of the biggest reasons for me saying, yes, I would love to check out this system from iBuyPower, because I think this is an avenue that could be excellent for a gamer who wants a serious system without having to go through the risk of building it themselves. Is it actually going to be worth it? Well, we're going to find out. But before we get too far in there, I want to shout out to Epic Gear again. I've noticed some keyboard manufacturers, they're starting to brag about these lower actuation points for gaming. Like, hey, if you've got something around a 1.5 millimeter actuation point, then you're going to have faster reaction times and better gaming. Defiant from Epic Gear, already doing that. In fact, I think Epic Gear should probably promote that aspect of their keyboards a little more. I game and I work on these guys all the time. I admit it. I think that actuation point makes a huge difference, even though the distances are so tiny. I love the Defiants, love Epic Gear. Check them out as always. Really thanking them for sponsoring my channel and want to still help them out because I really think they got some excellent stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and get back into this iBuyPower system. So we really want to know, hey, is this a good option for somebody who doesn't want to build their own system? Let's take a closer look. Let's see what actual parts they're putting into the system for starters. Take a look at a few settings. Then we can throw in those testing results and come to a conclusion on this. Normally, the most important part of any of my reviews is going to be the testing stage. Performance. But, this isn't also my normal review. I'm not doing a component and saying, all right, how does this component compare to other components? This is a pre-assembled workstation. So we're going to have a pretty good idea of what performance we should expect, especially if you're somebody who follows reviews. And honestly, we're going to do some testing results, but I'm not going to try to show you how iBuyPower is going to get some magical more performance out of the components used. So in a lot of ways, this section of my review is going to be the most important for what we are trying to see here. So, biggest thing I want to know, if I'm buying a custom-built gaming system already that has already been pre-assembled for me, then what components are we using? What is iBuyPower throwing at us? So the first thing you can tell, and some of you might recognize this and some of you might not, but this is a clear NZXT S340 Elite chassis. So if I kind of angle this out just a little bit up front here, you can kind of see that we've got a little different front panel than the S340 Elite has. We actually have a tempered glass panel. iBuyPower symbol here is just right there in the bottom. If I just lift that up just a little bit, you can see it a little bit better. So right there we see that even though this is an S340 Elite, iBuyPower's put some special branding. They've got a logo here. I'm really happy though that they're using NZXT. I really like NZXT cases, and I think that's a fantastic choice. Now, this liquid cooler. This is clearly just kind of, well, pretty obvious to me. Maybe not 100% sure, but I'm almost positive this is an Asetek cooler. So we're not going to be talking about crazy custom loop performance, but a custom loop would cost way too much money to throw in a system, so I don't blame them for that. But judging by the bracket and the pump head, this looks very much like just a standard Asetek unit. I doubt they're having to, you know, grab this from anybody but Asetek specifically themselves. So that would be my guess, and I would be pretty safe in assuming that. So we have, it looks like a reference GTX 1080 Ti, and you know, I would expect that too. Of course, Nvidia's done such a great job with their reference cards that that is not a concern. We will have a blower straight out the back, but I don't think we're going to see huge differences in performance compared to certain overclocked variances. And if you really want to garner the most performance out of any GPU, you really want liquid cooling, not an air cooler. Alrighty, G.Skill Trident Z for the RAM. So of course G.Skill, once again, really huge, great company. I'm really pleased with that. So on the motherboard side, now remember, this is kind of more the professional workstation type motherboards that can also do gaming and stuff. But for this one, and we've got an Intel 7900X in here. So in this particular board, they decided to go with MSI. And if you were to ask me what my thoughts are on that, I would say that is the most logical choice, in my opinion, for a company that would be trying to have good quality, but still have a reasonable cost to performance ratio. If I was to choose out of the brands that I know, the brands that I would really trust would be, you know, probably Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, and ASRock, and not in any particular order. But, you know, maybe I shouldn't leave anything out there, but it's just kind of my own personal opinion based on what I've done. MSI feels like the perfect balance between, you know, a good brand name that has dependable quality, but also isn't too costly because of their name. If there is one thing so far that I'm seeing in this front section that bothers me ever so slightly, it is the ASA fans. And so these are RGB LED fans though, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why iBuyPower picked them. But we're going to look into some other issues that we've had with the fans here, and we'll get to that in a second. But these things are using 3-pin connectors. And so for instance, we have a CPU fan connected that's going to one of these radiator fans. The 3 pins are not going to offer you the kind of PWM control that a 4-pin connector will. So it's kind of a bummer. And I don't blame iBuyPower for this. And the reason why is because if you look at ASA's site, these fans are advertised as 4 pins. I'm not really sure why they're 3. So I feel like that might have been just a little bit of misdirection or something. But they're not too bad of fans, and we'll find that out as we get things turned on. Ha ha ha, we discovered ASA's dirty little secret, didn't we? So as it turns out, we have just a pretty much of a straight normal power supply. We're going to talk about that brand here in just a second, but these are just cable extensions. But that's not a problem in my opinion. Makes them look a lot nicer on the front end, and that's a very cost-efficient way to give you a very custom looking build without costing you too much money. So that is no problem at all. Unless, you know, there might be some performance degradation by extending the length of the cables. But if you're that worried about performance, then you're not probably buying a custom built computer pre-assembled. You're probably sleeving all of your own cables and cutting them to the exact length so you have no extra slack that you don't need. Everything looks cable managed pretty well. This is not a perfect cable management, like just to me made perfect, but even me, I would not do anything better than this. This is out of the way, allows me to get my panel on, keeps everything organized. Now this is going to be for iBuyPower more than anybody else. But one thing I did notice is when I was trying to trace down some fan pin connections and find out what was going on, we'll talk about that more when we check over some of the BIOS settings. I would jiggle some of these little loops here and my LEDs would start flickering. And so what I noticed is some of these wires, and if you look right here, they got bent too close to the bottom of the connector, which seemed to weaken the connection a little bit. So one of the things I would recommend with iBuyPower is make sure, like if you look at this one, see how there's a nice loop so it's not bending right at the base of the connector? Really make sure when you guys are assembling to make sure they leave a little bit more slack at the back of the loop there to keep from possibly damaging the cables, because some wires can only handle so much twist before the wires start breaking inside. I actually loosened it a little bit myself, seemed to keep that from happening anymore, and it was fine. So yeah, we've got our hard drive down here. Of course, this is our, you know, multi-terabyte external drive for extra storage, using a Samsung Evo 950 or 960 Evo, I believe, for the solid state drive. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at this power supply, and then let's start looking at some BIOS settings. One of the big deals about buying a system like iBuyPower versus, you know, I'm going to be really blunt, a cheap Dell, is one, the motherboard, which I didn't really point that out when I was pointing out the motherboard, but yeah, I'd gladly take an MSI over anything Dell offers, and the power supply. Now, if you know anything about companies like HP and Dell, it's not always that their systems are that bad, but they skimp hardcore on power supply. So, if we pull this guy out the rest of the way, we are going to find out that we have a high power branded power supply. So this looks like a company based on research that comes from Surfa or Surtech, and they're a company that makes some pretty decent to some pretty average power supplies, it looks like. It would be better if this was like, say, a Seasonic or an EVGA, but you also you can have that option in iBuyPower's site when you're building it. That said, let's take a look at what we have here. So I see an 800 BR, so that probably means we got an extremely high chance that we've got an 800 watt power supply. And if I pull this out just a little bit further where I couldn't barely see it, then there it is. There's the 800 watt. Now, the thing is you'll see this 80 plus in this silver color and you think, wait, is this like an 80 plus platinum or something? And no, it is just an 80 plus bronze certified. Is that a little disappointing? Yeah, maybe, but we got to take it in perspective. So if I was building this system myself, would I trust a bronze PSU in it? No, I would want a gold rated at least or something higher. But if I compare this to a Dell, an 800 watt 80 plus bronze is fantastic. So we're not going to have modular cabling. We're not going to have a lot of the features you'd get from other PSUs, but that could really factor into price as well. All right, let's go take a quick look in that BIOS, and then we're going to start looking at our testing. Did I almost forget to show LED awesomeness? I almost forgot to show that. So I asked iBuyPower about a little bit of bling, and they said they could hook me up for this review. So they've got some nice LED lighting going on, and you know, I dimmed the lights a little bit because, let's face it, I know how you like it. So if we take a look at this, you can kind of see why the choice for AZA. AZA's probably giving them a budget-friendly option, and the LED lighting looks fantastic on these rings. Really impressed with that from AZA. So even though they've got the 3-pin connectors instead of the 4-pin, that looks good. The airflow on these guys does not feel too bad. Yeah, I didn't bother going through a whole ton of airflow testing because in my experience, I found that really there's airflow's kind of airflow. Static pressure does matter, but I don't know how much static pressure these guys are going to have for rads, but an aluminum rad with a little bit wider fins isn't going to be too big of a deal one way or another. So we're doing okay here. I like the way they look. They're very aesthetically pleasing to look at. G-Skill RAM, the lighting on there looks fantastic. And then we've even got a nice LED strip up top here to add some really good ambiance lighting to the rest of the build. When you consider that they decided to go with white cable extensions, which reflect the lighting very well, this looks excellent. So yeah, for your viewing pleasure, nice close-up look at that beautiful lighting. And well, let's go ahead, take a look at some BIOS settings, and then we will move on to our testing. Okay, I want to do just a quick little overview of some of the BIOS settings, just to kind of get an idea of what iBuyPower is doing and just to see if there's anything I noticed. Actually, only want to point out a couple things. One thing that I think is kind of pretty simple, and the other thing that, well, I kind of noticed. So obviously they're using an XMP profile here, and that's pretty great. Gets you, straight kind of a, factory overclock of the RAM, as it were. So that's, good for performance. If you go to the settings, all this stuff is pretty well set. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff I had to worry about. You can flash the BIOS if you want, and I'm just going to say no, but I wouldn't recommend doing that if you feel like that's risky at all. That's kind of more of a power user thing. Overclocking, we're using a 7900X. We've got it up to, its factory is 3.3 on all cores, but they've got it set up to 42, multiplier of 42 on all cores. So that's 4.2 gigahertz essentially. Pretty great overclock coming out of the factory. And that's all they do. They didn't change any voltage settings or anything like that. So I'm gonna say that you might even find a little more headroom if you like to tweak it and you want to go ahead and manually set that V-core so it's not going too high on the voltage and raising the temperatures too much. But you don't have to mess with it if you don't want to. Now, there was something that I noticed, and this is kind of important because especially with ASA using 3-pin fans instead of PWM, we need to make sure things were set right. So I noticed when I was first turning the system on and stuff that one of the top fans on my ASA, on the radiator from the ASA, wasn't spinning. And I was like, huh, that's weird. Come to find out that, some fans don't spin if they're not getting enough voltage. So normally I bet this wouldn't even be a problem, but with 3-pins fans, and this might be something more that iBuyPower should take a look at, but in case you want to make sure it's good, you can too. So in a case like this, we're good, we're golden. We have PWM and DC options, but we need to use DC because these are 3-pin fans. So I went through, and even the pump is using a 3-pin. So I went through and set my own smart fan modes with my own temperature curves. Now, one of the weird things that MSI does though, is they use a voltage instead of a percentage. And if you've dealt with 3-pin fans before, you might know that sometimes, now I did not want to move that, but I just did. So now I'm going to try to get back to my spot here. One of the curses of using a really sensitive mouse. Some fans on 3-pins will not spin if they drop below 7 volts, and they just kind of stop working at that point. So as you can see then, what I did is I set my lower CPU temperature to 30 degrees, my upper to 80, my voltage at 7 volts with a curve going straight up to 100% at 80 degrees, full 12 volts onto the fans. Really simple curve, so that if my CPU is under a lot of stress, it'll help those radiator fans push a little harder, as well as the pump. Since my system fans are, one of these system fans is using the radiator, well, I might as well have the 4th fan matched to kind of help keep the airflow flowing through the case. So I just put everything kind of on the same curve, DC mode. Something to keep an eye out on. iBuyPower, if you keep getting these 3-pin fans from ASA, might be an idea just to go ahead and set everything to DC mode to make sure the fans keep spinning. All right, I think we're ready. Let's talk about some of the testing. So, the question is we've got quad channel memory, we've got a GTX 1080 Ti. How much gaming are we really going to do on this, or do we want this system for something more? So first off, let's talk about gaming. The GTX 1080 Ti, it's the most beastly card out there, and so of course I'm going to be running everything 4K ultra setting, 60 frames per second. No. And so that was one of the first things I wanted to test. So I ran a couple of different games, and so if you crank everything, including your anti-aliasing, you are going to tank your frame rates. I mean, Deus Ex was probably in the teens on Ultra with max AA. Rise of the Tomb Raider, it was struggling too. But if we're gonna really play this at 4K, we probably don't need max anti-aliasing. We're probably gonna err somewhere on the side of very low to none. Some people aren't even gonna notice aliasing at all at 4K. Some people say they do. Since I don't have 4K personally, I erred on the side of just a little bit of anti-aliasing. But Deus Ex, when you start cranking those settings at 4K, it was hard to maintain 30 frames per second. So we did, and that's pretty good, but you're kind of like, man, wish I would get more than 30 frames at 4K. Rise of the Tomb Raider did a lot better, but it's a little bit older by now to the point where, well, maybe you're not going to get 60 frames on 4K in a lot of games. Now, you're not going to get a lot of benefit going above 60 because, as far as I know, still 4K monitors cap out at 60 frames per second. So you're trying to hit that target. Some of your more recent AAA games, they're going to bottleneck your G1080 Ti, believe it or not. And that's kind of all I wanted to point out, is to say, hey, at 4K, you're going to still have some trouble getting there. But what about 1440? Now, I don't think you should be buying a system like this and playing 1080. It's kind of complete overkill for that, so don't even waste your time. But I did some testing more at 1440, and boy, did that unlock the frame rate. Here's the other thing too. You can actually get some solid 144 hertz refresh range on some good 1440p monitors. If you're playing games like Overwatch and World of Warcraft that have some fast reaction times and need to move, you are going to do great on this. In fact, we were able to way easily push over 100 frames per second on both of those titles. So even just some minor setting tweaks would easily get you right up to that 144 cap of 144 refresh range monitor. Now, if you're really playing ultra competitive, want to play consistently at 200 plus refresh range and get one of those ridiculous monitors, then 1080 Ti is going to do that too. So overall, this is a beast of a card. If you're going to be playing at higher resolutions, then you're really going to want a 1080 Ti. What about the quad channel RAM though? I figured, well, Deus Ex was killing my frame rate the most at 4K, so we'll just see how that works. So I pulled out two of the G Skill Tridents. I threw them into the same two slots, the same side of the slot, so that everything was dual channel. MSI's motherboard had a little bit of fit of that. They're like, you're not using an optimal RAM configuration. I'm like, I know, I'm trying to test something. So I ran Deus Ex 4K. I ran it with dual channel and quad core, and I may have had a 1 frame frames per second difference from quad channel versus the dual channel RAM. So if you are looking at an iBuyPower element for purely gaming, well, don't bother with a 7900X. Get like a good 7700K, and you know, maybe if you still want those extra cores, grab yourself a Ryzen 7 and get like an 1800X or a 1700 or a 1700X. But you know what? A Ryzen's going to do great, or a 7700K for gaming. Now, benchmarks wise, this is where we start seeing this system go crazy. Those 10 cores and 20 threads are fantastic. Unfortunately for Intel, AMD's being way more competitive there. So this chip is not just completely blowing away a Ryzen in multi-threaded tests. But where I did notice a pretty surprisingly good, impressive result is if you've got some really memory-intensive applications that use a heavy amount of memory workloads, that quad channel benefits a lot in benchmarks. In fact, you almost double your throughput in your scores on A64 with quad channel over dual channel. So, you know, looking at that, there is some benefits but you've got to know that you've got applications that need that quad channel memory and know that you're going to get a benefit out of it. That is not at all a problem with iBuyPower though, because the simple fact is you can customize these systems. So let's go ahead, wrap this system up now. I really didn't want to focus too much on the testing because I really feel like it's more about the build and the components in a situation like this. Let's go ahead and see how the pricing works and how everything wraps up. So what do we have here? I mean, overall, when we look at what iBuyPower is doing, we've got an excellent custom-built PC system here. I mean, really, it's fantastic. Pretty much everything that they are using is pretty good quality parts. I mean, we've got some things that are a little bit more budget-friendly, like the ASA fans, but we've got a lot of things in there that are just really good, top-notch quality. Having a board from MSI, RAM from G-Skill, we're not complaining. And of course, we expect Intel and GeForce to give us some top-notch products, and they do. So there's not much to complain about. So really, what is the problem with the iBuyPower system? There's really not a lot I can complain about. If I was to compare this to a custom built system, sure, there's going to be a lot of problems I'm going to have. Why? Because it's all personal preference. You know what? I kind of want a different case. I want a custom liquid cooling system in there. I want a better, beefier air cooler on that graphics card. Well, okay, let's get even down to some of that. You can select a lot of those options by yourself on iBuyPower's website, because you can customize all these systems. You can get an EVGA style GeForce. You can get platinum or gold rated power supplies. You can stay with 800, or you can go up to 1000 watts. You can choose to have the sleeved cable extensions, because that's actually an option they offer. So everything that they do, when I was pulling this thing apart and showing what the system was made of, are actually things you should see on the list breakdown all to yourself. So really, as we look at that, iBuyPower doing an excellent job. There was one problem I ran across, and that I'm not going to really blame iBuyPower because this has been a problem I've had with Intel multiple times, so I can't really totally blame them for it. But if you don't know how to do your own reformats and set some settings and go through some troubleshooting headaches, you're going to be at their mercy and their support. So, you know what? Maybe I should have pushed that a little bit more, but I'm a reviewer. It's really hard for me to let other people fix my problems. So, as it turns out, Intel just had some weird issue with the OS being installed on that Samsung drive. The computer booted up, and I got to the welcome screen just fine, no problems. But as soon as I would get done finishing and customizing all my Windows 10 settings, didn't matter if I set Express, didn't matter if I set them custom to, like, you know, turn off a lot of the sending data stuff that I don't really like Windows trying to do, even though I know they're pretty much doing it anyway. It would just black screen, reboot, come back. It would never boot. So I actually had to do a fresh Windows install to get past that problem. So that one though, and then I had to go through some hoops. And if you saw my video where I'm just really complaining about Intel, well, that was the hoops I was jumping through to get this system back up and running for no good reason. There's just something about that Samsung drive and the drivers that just wasn't getting along from the factory image. So iBuyPower, if you catch that, pick up on that, and you think there's something that changes that and fixes that, that'll be great, because I'll add that in the description, and if I get an update, you guys will see it there. But otherwise, you know, I would imagine their support's going to take care of you though, because if you can't boot your computer, they'll probably walk you through that. But it's a problem you don't want to have to face. And it's a problem that I had even when I was reviewing my 7700K and the Z270 board. Intel's just slamming out so many new chipsets, so many different minor tweaks to architecture, that I think they're shooting themselves in the foot a little bit there. But you know what? Once we get in, all that performance is there. Intel still has fantastic, amazing single thread performance. And they're doing really good on multi-thread too, and now they're only going to do better because they have incentive to compete with AMD. So iBuyPower, doing great. If you're gaming, you don't need all the professional stuff, but if you are doing professional stuff, then yeah, get your quad channel RAM, get your higher core processors, probably help you out. Price-wise on this system is about $3,600. Yep, almost $3,600 on the MSRP that I was given. That's a lot of money. I've bought cars cheaper. You've probably bought cars cheaper than that. But if I take all the components and pick them all and put them together, I actually came right up to about $3,600 myself. Problem being, I didn't add RGB fans, I didn't add cable extensions, I didn't add an RGB lighting strip. I probably would have gone over in price. And I can say, if you are just about saving money and you don't care about the experience of building your own system and you want super high-end parts, I think iBuyPower is going to save you some money, because they are able to get, you know, massive deals on things like processors and graphics cards by bulk ordering them that you can't get when you're building yourself. So I have to give And I'm not giving iBuyPower just their Element this award. I'm really giving iBuyPower as a recommendation to somebody who doesn't want to build their own PC an Editor's Choice Award. I love the way their site's organized. I love the way the shopping goes. I think their pricing is as fair as you can just about get it. The quality is genuine custom PC. This is not some kind of Dell with a very specific motherboard and it's running off of a 500-watt power supply that doesn't even make sense for a gaming system. High-end gaming system at the very least. So, pure overclock, Editor's Choice. Check them out. I still recommend building your own, but I get it. Not for everyone. Like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments what you think of this video, and I catch you later.